All right, tell me about you.
I can tell you about the word you, about the you. But what shows itself to me is that actually there's no such thing as a person. And the whole format of thinking that there is a personal you is just more of the entanglement that keeps humanity in suffering and desire, and all this seems sort of abstract when I hear myself saying it, except that I've lived some of this and I've seen that you unwind. You know, sometimes we imagine that there's an outside source, that we need something outside ourselves to sustain us. There's a way in which that can feel true, but it's never true in the way that the mind usually identifies it, because we go through so many mind constructs and we think that's the real me talking, and it's really a series of images. And this is a note from a book. This is not mine. This is from Nisargadatta, and he said, "You are the proof of everything. You do not come from somewhere. You do not go anywhere." And when you sit with that, you can feel the actuality of how that works. It's just like if I think, another piece of that is, if I think that there's someone on the planet that can validate who I am or my worth, I can only imagine that because I've already given him the authority to validate that. So there really is no outside authority. I'm tricking myself by thinking, oh, I will have achieved when this person tells me. But it's I who have told myself that he knows me. And I think that's really important, to be able to realize that the mind is working like that. And it's not just your mind. You know, it's world mind. It's just like when you start to talk about ego, and people will think, well, my ego, it needs some work. And there's a way in which that's true, but bottom line, there isn't even my ego. There's thought, there's ego that rises simultaneously. Every single incident is separate. It'll all feel like it's that you, or that me, or that my. But none of those are valid at the level where you realize that they're, if ego exists at all, the problematical state, it exists as a world state, and it's not a personal mind, and it's not a personal me.
Do you think that people are telepathic?
You mean separate people?
Well,
I mean, you're asking a lot of questions there.
Okay. Well, we hear about the collective consciousness. But for there to be a collective consciousness, there has to be some sort of communication. Do you believe that there is a network, that we are networked at a subconscious level? Telepathically?
I think those words kind of get in the way. I can't say I don't believe in that, but I don't think of it in those forms. Because, you know, that sort of thinking brings you back into forms without realizing it. It brings you back into a sense of a separate self.
What's wrong with being in forms?
There's nothing wrong with being in forms unless you think that the forms are something outside the emanation of the one. You have to really be thinking in inclusive terms.
Well, then if you're thinking in inclusive terms, and you're thinking in terms of one, then people are telepathic. People are connected.
People, they're connected. We are all connected.
Yeah.
But that telepathic also includes the world of thought, right? I mean,
Right.
It gets really... You have to get pretty precise, because when you start saying telepathic, it starts sounding like a separate... like many separate entities speaking to each other. and that there's something to be known that's greater. I mean, it takes in. I'd have to really sit with that because I don't think in terms of telepathy.
Well, what would you think would happen if suddenly everybody except one was removed from the planet? That if everybody ceased to exist except one person, what would happen at that moment for that one person?
I can't even think in those terms. I can't think like that because I don't. Again, it's pulling it back into this belief in all these separate entities. There is only one person.
Do you believe in life after death?
I don't believe there is any death. I think there is only life. And
do you believe that consciousness succeeds the human form? In other words, will your consciousness continue? Do you believe your consciousness will continue after your mortal shell has been
I don't
cast
think I
aside?
have a separate consciousness. I think consciousness is trying to be born or trying to recognize it. This is just words, all right? But the vision that shows this up to me is that consciousness is being born through human forms. It's trying to recognize itself. That's the beauty of being an individual form, is the flowering that can occur through this form so that consciousness recognizes itself as awake, so to speak, as actual, not just as many, many separate forms of identity.
Bandershot.